to the April 2021 edition of Finance 201. This month's edition, we're going to be talking about Preneed. Now, Preneed has many dynamics to it. It is a most complex subject, and it changes state by state. But today we're going to cover Preneed marketing. Joining me today to help me discuss this subject are two people. Nikki McQueen, the wife of John McQueen, who ran their Preneed marketing department at Anderson McQueen, and David Blouin, Executive Vice President of PFP, Preneed Funeral Programs, in Metairie, Louisiana. Ask yourself why funeral homes offer Preneed. Well, I think that there's three reasons. First, consumers want Preneed. There is a comfort to knowing that you have planned for the inevitable. Secondly, it's great for your business. It's more than just a marketing tool. It is a verifiable way to serve families that you heretofore have not served. In fact, in reality, it's both offensive and defensive. Offensive because you get to sell families on using your firm that you've never served before. And it's defensive because you want to write those families that you have served before your competitor does. If we look back on the last year, we've never dealt with a pandemic. You've never operated a funeral home in a pandemic. Maybe 4 or 5 generations ago they did, but they left no notes. In a pandemic, the funeral business changes. As you know, the funeral business has 3 dynamics: at need, pre-need, and imminent. Of the 3, imminent usually is the smallest dynamic. But as we've learned from coronavirus, we were all potentially imminent. As 2020 came to an end, the Preneed professionals discovered that even in a pandemic, Preneed was significant. In Q1 of 2020, just before the country shut down in March, Preneed was going along in its normal routine. From March through June, there might have been a lot of pent-up demand, but no one had yet figured out how to safely market Preneed. But in the last 6 months of 2020, the sales of Preneed were the highest in any 6-month period. That's because people understood the importance of Preneed and realized that oftentimes you don't have the ability to have a predictable period of time to arrange. Please join me as I begin my dialogue today with Nikki McQueen and David Blouin on the hows and whys of marketing Preneed. Welcome to Finance 201. My guest today, Nikki McQueen. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you, Nikki. We've known each other for a while, and I've had a chance to see the work that you've done on Anderson McQueen up close and personal. For those of you that don't know Nikki, she is not only the author of Lessons from the Dead with a guy of a similar name, John McQueen, but Nikki and John ran the Anderson McQueen Funeral Home, as well as the A Life Tributes, a pet crematory business, a care center, and a boutique cemetery, all in the St. Pete Beach, Tampa, Florida areas. So Nikki, glad to have you with me.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
For those of you that haven't known Nikki professionally prior to joining Anderson McQueen, Nikki spent about 15 years in marketing and sales for a couple of Fortune 300 companies. That's where she learned about selling and customer service and sales skills. And she won several awards. She took those skills and brought them into the Anderson McQueen brand and brought it into funeral service. At Anderson McQueen, you basically oversaw the Preneed sales team.
Yes, that was one of my jobs there. I had the privilege of doing, yes.
Nikki, what makes a person a good Preneed salesperson?
There are a number of different qualities that we would look for in a salesperson. One of the qualities that I looked for, one of the most important, is that they must believe in the value of the funeral. And I'm using the term funeral generic here, you know, it could be funeral, a memorial service, but they truly must believe in the value of the funeral. If they do not, they really should not be working in your organization. Another trait that's important in your pre-need person is they have to have empathy for the individual. They have to have empathy, and they have to be able to show that empathy to the family that they're working with. Also, I feel it's important that they've also been through the experience of losing someone very close to them themselves. If they've not walked through those phases of grief themselves, how are they going to work with someone that's been through it? So that's an important trait. And finally, they have to have a personality. If you don't have personality, you can't work with people, you can't sell people. So you must have personality. So if you have those 4 traits, you can train the rest. So that's what I look for. And that's what John would look for. I mean, we both looked for the same thing in our team. So that's why we're great partners.
So you identify a candidate who has these personality skills and life experience. Mm-hmm. And then what kind of training do you put them through so that they can be effective for your organization?
That's a great question, Dan. I'm glad you asked. We had a lot of training for our new hires, for all of our team members. One in particular that I really enjoyed was an afternoon session that John put together that trained our team on the history of Anderson McQueen Company as a whole. It started with our foundation, the founders, how they started with one location and how we grew into the 6 locations plus the cemetery and the crematory and the pet division that we had at that point in time. So it was important that everybody on the team, including our pre-need team, understood where we came from, how we got to where we were, and what each branch delivered in order for them to work with us, because they were going to be asked questions when they were out in the field, and we wanted them to answer it properly. So that was the beginning of their training. Then from there, of course, you need to train them on the products they're going to be serving. You know, they need to understand if they were selling insurance or if they were selling trust. They need to understand those products, of course, but then you have to get into the actual sales training. And so that's something I could sit here and go on forever. I don't know how deep you want me to get into this, but that's something that I really enjoy. I mean, sales is something I've spent my entire life doing. I feel like sales is something that we all do every single day, no matter how we present ourselves. When we go to the grocery store, we're selling ourselves. So that's something when you're out finding a mate, you're selling yourself. We sell ourselves every day. So that is the next step. After you train them on your business and your company and your firm, and then you train them on the product that they're selling, and then you train them on how they're going to work with the individuals. So that's I guess where you could say I really get excited, because I have little nuts and morsels that I like to do. Like when I would work with the family, I'm a little bit old school. I like to have a pad of paper. And say if I was working, I know we're talking about pre-need, but I did a lot of marker sales also. So if I was working with a family and I'm working with them on a marker, I just had a pad of paper there. And I'd talk to them and I'd explain markers to them, because they didn't buy a marker every single day. And I'd explain what the difference in colors meant and why it would affect pricing and what the different everything. And as they made decisions, I'd just jot it down. I mean, it wasn't a big production, but I just jot it down. And then I'd get to a point where I'd say to them, wow, you really have made quite a few decisions here. All that's left is blank. And I'd let them know that this huge monumental task that they walked in the door to do, they've completed. And I'd say, if you'd like, we could complete this right now, and here's your payment options, and bam, the sale was done. And it was no longer this monumental task. They just completed, designed, and purchased a marker without realizing it. So we did the same with our pre-need. We tried to teach them that you don't go into it with, it's this big, huge, scary contract. If you just break it down and they're making little decisions along the way, then they can accomplish the task. It's not so scary. You're helping the person make small decisions. And in the end, it's just a matter of choosing how to pay for it.
Obviously, based upon your background, you weren't born upstairs in a funeral home.
No.
You learned this business out of love and affection. So you also had to learn about pre-need.
Yes.
Through the same adult experience. What were the reasons that you thought it was productive for Anderson McQueen to be proactive in pre-need marketing?
I guess if you look at it from the ownership shoes, it makes financial sense, because pre-need is a building block for your future. Pre-need is ensuring future business down the road. Everyone, deaths are always going to occur, so you know there's always going to be someone calling, but pre-need is in a way ensuring those calls. So we always found that with pre-need, you're building future business that you know is going to come in the door at some time down the future. You don't know when, of course, but you're securing that. But in addition to knowing that you're building future business, you're also building your brand. You're out there in the community. It's another marketing branch of your business, because although you're out there trying to secure future business, your team is also out there introducing themselves to the community in different ways, whether it's going into someone's home to sell the pre-need, or going to an event, a community fair or a senior fair, and presenting your brand to them. And that's just one more way of touching a person who, you don't know, could walk out the door and have a death occur in their family, and they've just met you. They've just met a representative from your firm, and they're like, I just met Jane Doe from Anderson McQueen, and I'm going to call them. So we often thought of the different aspects of our firm. Like pre-need was not only pre-need, it was marketing. Our pet division was not only our pet division, it was marketing. Our cemetery division was not only our cemetery division, it was marketing, and same with our markers. Everything that we did was not only that part, but it was another way to market our funeral service. Everything was marketing is how we looked at it. So.
And the way you present it, they were all intra-related.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm curious, I've read the book. I love the book. It's about 2 hours of uninterrupted cover to cover reading, at least for a person who moves his lips as slowly as I do when I read. But what motivated you and John to write the book?
We are very high touch customer service people, so we get very aggravated when we go out places and we don't receive the level of service that we want to have. So we thought, we worked in an industry that nobody wants to come to. People don't sit there and say, hey, let's go have a funeral today. So thought if we could work in an industry and make it a pleasant experience for people, and not that you want to go to your local funeral home, but we would actually have people stop in for cookies and coffee and stop in to say hello to us. If we could make it where people would stop by to visit us at a funeral home, then what we were doing is something that could help other businesses that were pleasant to visit excel far beyond. If it worked in funeral service, it can work anywhere. And to be quite frank, it's simple stuff. And it's an easy book to read because we have a very short attention span, or at least I do. John, or I can't say that for John, but I do. I have the attention span of a gnat.
But is there one particular lesson that you would like the people watching this video to understand?
Let's see. Well, of course, there's the SOAR principle, that we always say, which is sincere greetings and goodbyes, own the guest experience, appearance matters, and remember the wow. And the only reason I'm saying the SOAR principle is because SOAR is a short way of getting across a theme. And one thing about me is I have short little sayings for everything. So what I'm saying about that principle is you have to have something that you say to yourself that keeps you motivated every day. So I have little things I say to myself and little things I've said to my kids since they were little that keep me going. So I say things like, I had a trainer that I took around when I sold title insurance, Kim Dickey, and she would go into the real estate offices with me, and she would always tell the realtors, the front door is locked, but the back door is open. And what that would mean is there's always a way in. There's always a way in. And that has helped me time and time again. So since my kids were little, I've said to them, that front door is locked, but the back door is open. There's always a way in. You figure it out. And so when they come across an obstacle, I go, how are you getting in? And they go, I can do it this way. And they use that to this day. And I use that to this day. So there's other ones too. Like I tell myself, I didn't come this far to only come this far. And that's one of my favorites. So I just encourage everyone out there listening to your program, have a saying that you keep in your head that keeps you motivated, whether you're in sales, if you're in pre-need, or you're working directly with the families as at need, or if you're on the facilities team, or if you're support for the funeral directors and your administration, or you're answering the phone. Every single person in that funeral home is one of the most vital members of that team. And what they're doing is helping that family heal. And so you keep your little saying, and you remember, keep saying it yourself every day, because you are helping that family and that keeps you going, and you didn't come this far to only come this far. So yes.
My guest is Nikki McQueen, from the formerly from the Anderson McQueen Funeral Home, but presently from Life, and the co-author of Lessons from the Dead. Nikki, one of the questions that I ask everyone that I interview, because I'm really concerned about the future. In your opinion, and Anderson McQueen was one of the preeminent businesses in this country. In your opinion, what do you think funeral service needs to do in the future to remain relevant and profitable?
Okay, well, I will say I had a partner at Anderson McQueen who is an out-of-the-box thinker, and he would always just have all these ideas that were just crazy, 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 and he wanted to try all these things. And I'm more the type that was like, oh, wait a minute, wait, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to make this work? So we did work well, or how are we going to pay for it? So he really made me stretch, and I made him think about the money part. So we worked well that way, but I would say how he helped me is I would fight change somewhat. I would fight it a little. So my advice is stop fighting the change. Stop fighting the change and embrace it, and be the change, I guess, that your competition will be scrambling to catch up to. So you be the change that your competition down the street is going to be scrambling to try to catch, like John McQueen. That's what John McQueen is. So.
And when you referred to that person that was your partner, and you were referring to in life through the business And
Yeah.
and the name again was what?
John McQueen.
John McQueen. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Gee, if only he was nearby to like
Yeah.
stick his head in.
Get those cheaters off. He looks like a little old man right now with his cheaters on. So.
Hey Dan, how you doing?
Yeah. So, but he's someone that would always have these grandiose ideas, and I'm sitting there going, ah. So, but I did appreciate that I would sometimes fight the change, and he made me see that I need to stop fighting it. So I suggest others stop fighting the change.
Nikki, dealing with salespeople sometimes has one peril in that sometimes being commission driven,
Yes.
they might put their own needs before a family's needs. How do you deal with that?
That's what I call commission breath. And the thing that concerns me most about commission breath is the families can smell that a mile away because it smells of desperation. And the salesperson, the pre-need salesperson needs to take a deep breath, relax, and take a step back for a moment and realize that they are there to help the family. And if they take a moment and put the family's needs ahead of their own, they will be rewarded in the end. So when they put the family first, even if that family does not purchase at that moment, the family will realize their needs were put ahead of the salesperson, and they will either be back to purchase or they will refer someone to them. So always put the family's need ahead of your own when you are in a sales position, and put away the commission breath.
Nikki, what do you tell salespeople to do that are afraid of not making that sale, especially in a one interview sale system?
Don't be afraid of the takeaway. So when you get to the sales process, when you get to the point where you're ready and you think, okay, all I need to do now is have the family sign and get that check or that credit card, and they're a little hesitant, they're nervous, they're scared. This is a big decision. At that point in time, you need to say to them, put down your pen, or however you have them sign, if it's electronic, just take a step back and say, we've made a lot of decisions here today. I understand you may need to think about this a bit. Would you like us to just take a step back and think about it overnight, and we can reconnect tomorrow and finish this? And I have found 9 times out of 10, the families always say to me, no, I've got to get this done today. They just need to know you're not pressuring them. If you don't pressure them, they want to finish it. When they feel pressured, they put up a wall. So once they see that you're not desperate, that you just want to take care of them, they'll complete the task. But that 10th person that doesn't want to finish it that day, they may not have the money. There may be a concern that I need to go home and transfer some money, or I don't want my check to bounce, or they just may want to check with someone. Let them do it. Take care of them. Put their needs first.
I want to thank Nikki McQueen for being a part of Finance 201. Nikki, thanks for being with us today. I love the book and I love the lessons.
Thank you, Dan. It's been my pleasure.
Welcome to Finance 201. My guest to talk about pre-need marketing is a guy who sits up at the top of a pretty prestigious company with a 4-decade experience in pre-need marketing, David Blouin. David, welcome to Finance 201.
Thank you, Dan, for having me.
David, for people that don't know, PFP, Preneed Funeral Plans, is a company with more than 4 decades of experience nationwide in selling pre-need for privately owned funeral homes. Now, PFP, some people may not know the name, but I don't think there's anyone alive in this business that doesn't know Quinn Egan by name or by sight. as well as Quinn's running buddies, Michael O'Dwyer and Craig Henry. So when you figure that the three of them have probably been in half the funeral homes in the country?
Oh, no, I think you're shortchanging them. I mean, you can see that white hair coming from a mile away. I'd be surprised if they hadn't stepped foot in every single opportunity that there has been out there. Those guys, they paved the way.
Excellent. And David, your role within the company, the title is Executive Vice President and CFO, but you're really part of the team that's taking this company to the next generation.
Right. I started out doing a lot of the basic blocking and tackling for the business, and now we're more focused on expanding and growth through strategic partnerships with insurance companies, with other marketing partners, and developing tools that are best in class for both protecting, keeping those existing families loyal, but also the funeral home gain new families in their marketplaces.
A funeral home, if they're going to have a pre-need paradigm, can either do it themselves or bring in a professional company such as PFP. What are some of the things that you think you have the awareness that these funeral homes need to be doing that they don't understand on their own?
Well, again, Dan, going back, the at-need conversation is something that funeral homes have mastered in the sense that they have a deceased loved one in their care, and certain decisions have to be made within a certain time frame. So there's a bit of an urgency into the decision-making process because those decisions have to be made soon. The pre-need side is quite a bit different because in cases, the family doesn't have to do anything today. So what we do is we help train the funeral home to have that conversation on why addressing this inevitable life event is important to do it now versus later. And we've implemented tools in our training process that help us do that, but it boils down to how we got the family in front of us to begin with, because how we got the family in front of us is going to tell us where we need to direct that conversation and why they're there. And so we really drill down and listen as to why they're there and in front of us, and expand from there on why now is better than later.
So David, as a professional, to increase the opportunity for families to make pre-arrangements, what are some of the things that you do differently to get more families to talk about pre-need with someone?
Well, that comes down to the marketing programs. And what we believe in is a multifaceted approach. So there's no one magic bullet to get families to raise their hand. And Quinn Egan has always taught me it's not about lead generation. It's about getting families to raise their hand, to say, I'm not ready to buy anything, but I'd like to learn more about this. So we have what we call in our organization the 5 primary lead channels of pre-need. 2 of those lead channels are designed to protect existing families and keep them loyal to the funeral home. The other 3 are designed to gain new families that the funeral home has not served in the past.
David, what are the 2 channels that you use to protect the relationship with existing families?
Well, Dan, protection is so important because if we can't protect what we already have, then we're going to have a very hard time growing the business. So those 2 channels are the first one is one that every funeral home has. It's walk-in and call-in business. And it sounds simplistic, but what we do is we do a full review of the funeral home's gatekeeping so that when the term pre-need is even breathed to a gatekeeper, they know exactly what to do with that call. And then whoever is actually meeting with the family will go through our training program to take that. There are certain steps that are important. If you skip a step, it minimizes your chances. All right, it's a knock against your chances to get that family to ultimately prearrange. The second channel is aftercare. We never, ever want the funeral home's last interaction with the family to be the presentation of an invoice and to simply send them on their way. We do that through a program called Soft Touch Aftercare. And basically, we've analyzed the high grief points between on the first year's grief journey to where the funeral home can reach out to that family when they're hurting the most and let them know that they're still there for them.
So, David, you said there were 5 channels, 2 dealing with the existing consumer. What are the 3 channels that help you expand a funeral home's consumer base?
Yes, sir. And these 3 channels are all about, and what we focus and measure on is getting new families connected to our funeral home client. So the first one is probably the one that's been around for the longest time, and it's definitely not the sexiest one, and I understand that, but direct mail is still the leading way to get a conversation with a new family started. I've been in funeral homes a multitude of different times and say, well, we've done direct mail many times, it doesn't work. Well, there's a mastery to direct mail that's rather complicated. It's identifying families that are most likely to prearrange, and then it's messaging that gets them to, again, raise their hand to say that they want to know more, and then stepping through the appointment process.
So it starts with the list, and then it's the message.
Yes, Dan, and that's exactly right. And when we say list, what we've done is we went back and we looked at the last 100,000 prearrangements that we sold. Not people that replied to a marketing piece, but actually bought a prearrangement. And there were certain commonalities in the people that would buy a prearrangement or execute a prearrangement. So we're able to identify those characteristics. I can't tell you what they all are because Mr. Egan will kill me. But we've basically profiled who is most likely to prearrange, and we've, I think, perfected the message, and that's what sets our direct mail process apart from, a funeral home trying to go out and do it on their own with a local mail house.
I can tell you, after knowing Mr. Egan for probably 40 years, he's extremely analytical. And if there's 200 words in a pre-need letter, he wants to make sure that each of those words are the best word, and he'll run 3 or 4 different letters, just switching a couple words or the way the idea is presented to see if there's a change in the response rate.
That's exactly right. And I've been on the side of having to execute those things that happen in his brain that he wants to try to do. And, A/B test all of a sudden turn into A, B, C, D, E, F test. And it's it's an interesting analysis, but it's gotten us to where we are. And, I have a lot of faith in what we do and how we do it. And I know that it works.
One of the things that you said a moment ago is that you looked at a profile by looking at about 100,000 prearrangements, your most recent prearrangements, and clearly that's something that the typical privately owned funeral home can't do, won't do, and doesn't have that kind of a radix to be able to create that precise a profile. What makes a person a good pre-need salesperson?
I think what makes them, I think the best ones that we have are ones that educate versus pushing a sale. So they do a good job of listening why the family's there. Maybe they had an experience with a death recently. Maybe a neighbor died. Maybe they saw a TV report on COVID and seniors and things like that. But the best ones drill down as to why that family is sitting in front of them, and they build on that conversation from there. That is the main difference of the ones that I see that do it well versus not so well. And I think that's what sets them apart as being great versus good versus mediocre.
David, last month's issue of this column and this video piece dealt with surviving the first year that we've known COVID. Here we are in April 2021. March 2021 was pretty much the 12-month retrospective. What have you learned is different about pre-arrangements in this past year of living under a pandemic?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, what it did, and what I believe, and what the numbers show, is that it created a bunch of pent up demand, and it was amazing to watch and quite scary, as you can imagine. We came out of the blocks in January. COVID was entering the country at that time, maybe perhaps a little bit before then, and then we pretty rapidly went into a serious pandemic in March, and we saw our numbers just bottom out and tank, because the last people that want to meet face to face with you is the senior population. So, we tried a lot of things virtually. Some of it was successful, some of it wasn't. But ultimately, what ended up happening is things loosened back up, and people had, safety precautions in place. We got back to doing business the way that we are accustomed to doing business and the way that we know it works. And when that happened, we saw the numbers not only go up to where they were normalized, but we even grew as a result of the pandemic. Now, we're back in a pretty serious wave of cases right now. And so we're kind of analyzing where we are with that. But right now, for us, it's business as usual. And it's the same program that we used pre-pandemic, and it's working.
That's interesting to hear. The 2020 consumer survey conducted by the Foresight Companies basically said that consumers in all age groups studied from age 35 up started believing pre-need for funeral and cemetery was more important than ever, because, as some people said, you go from healthy to dead in 14 days. And once you are stricken, you don't have the time to prearrange like you would if you knew that you had cancer or heart problems or something that was more predictable.
Oh, look, I've never seen in my lifetime, which isn't as long as yours, no offense, but this thing has been all over the board, from people being asymptomatic to dying, to people that have pre-existing conditions and being fine, to people being totally healthy and dying. I mean, it's just all over the board.
My guest in Finance 201 today is David Blouin from PFP. PFP is as I'm learning, a consultant to the funeral homes, specializing in helping them put more pre-need and other marketing issues on the funeral homes table. David, what are some of the things people don't understand that a company like yours does?
Yeah, I think, Dan, one of the biggest things that maybe this is the wrong word, but bothers me, is that I think a lot of times our companies, PFP and some others like us, we get pigeonholed into this. Well, they only do turnkey business, meaning, they're going to take all the revenue off of the pre-need program. They're going to pay for the expenses. They're going to pay for the personnel. Well, I mean, yes, we do that, but we work with funeral homes in a multitude of different ways. And, we've helped numerous funeral homes run their own program and make their pre-need program a profit center. And it's more of a profit center than they could have ever imagined doing it by themselves, because what they're gaining and working with a third-party marketer is economies of scale. So, typically your third-party marketer is going to be bringing a funding partner, an insurance company, quite a bit of volume, which means that the third-party marketer's revenue stream, our ability to generate revenue, is higher. In the same token, third-party marketers have a lot of expenses for marketing. So I think PFP, we do in the neighborhood of 7 million pieces of direct mail a year, and we've perfected it. And because we give that kind of volume to our provider, our printing and postage costs are a lot less. So they can leverage us both on the revenue side and they can leverage us on the expense side to really turn their pre-need program into a profit center for them while having PFP as a consultant for their counselor, for what marketing they should be doing, for their market analysis and things of that nature.
David, thank you for being with us on Finance 201. Talking about pre-need marketing, David Blouin is the Executive Vice President and CFO of PFP, Preneed Funeral Plans. David, your insight on how funeral homes should and can use a consultant to maximize their pre-need program marketing, as well as at-need, is very informative. I thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Isard. Always a pleasure.
So what did we learn from my two guests? From Nikki, I learned what the key traits are in who to hire to be a pre-need salesperson and how to incorporate that person into your overall corporate culture, which helps them succeed. From David, I learned that a professional looks at pre-need from 5 dynamics. 2 of those deal with protecting your existing market share, and 3 deal with how to increase your market share. Pre-need is a very serious issue. Certainly you could do it yourself if you have the time or the people to dedicate to it, as John and Nikki had as they nominated Nikki. Or you could hire a third-party marketer, a professional with experience. I want to thank you for watching. I also want to let you know that if you have any questions for me, please reach out to me, either by email or phone. In the event you enjoyed this show, please subscribe. Share this link with your friends. Read the article in the Director magazine. And thank you for daring to learn.